welcome to your Colleagues Getting Coffee. My name is Annelies James, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Councillor Zoe Huggins.
Hello, good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
And I'm excited because there's many things going on in Gosport at the moment.
There is.
And you obviously have your new role in Gosport. So tell people who don't know you a little bit about you and your relationship with Gosport.
Okay, yeah, my relationship with Gosport is that this is my home. I've lived here, was born here, so really have a passion for the town and an understanding. I think I'm really connected to the water and the sea. I don't think I'd move away from that. Most of my career, maybe I've worked outside of Gosport, with more recently coming back to Gosport. And then in the last, I think this is our 5th week, that I am now leader of Gosport Borough Council.
Yeah, exciting. Females in power. Yes. I'm super into that. I was actually interested because I'm more of a recent resident of Gosport.
Yeah.
Probably, well, I bought my flat here about 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, I'd rented. But for me, I think there was a shift change when I realised that this is a town that needs to be taken care of. It needs custodians. It needs ambassadors. What was that point for you? Because I think we grow up in towns and we don't really think much about it.
Yeah.
But was there a point for you when you were like, actually, I can change our town, I can help our town? Did you have that epiphany?
Yeah, I did. And I suppose it first started off with getting into politics. So my background is education, and it was education policy, and my son was having problems at school. So I got involved in education policy, and then I found that sort of made me ask questions about I suppose how that looked locally from a school's perspective and my son's experience. And then my job changed. So I've worked in colleges across Hampshire, but then I was made redundant and I went to work for a charity. Mm-hmm. And that charity's office, although they worked across the south, the charity's office was on Stoke Road.
Okay.
So I came from someone commuting to working in Stoke Road. This must have been around about 2013. I think working for a charity, which I was a leader and a facilitator for youth and youth services and skills and apprenticeship. I delivered in Rowner, in town, in Seafield. I think it took me back to my roots of wanting to help people in education, but my roots of coming back to my town. And I think that's when I realised I could make a difference locally.
Yeah. So how did you get into it then? Because, I mean, there's a big step, isn't there, from kind of being aware of that. But what's your step in? Like, what do you do?
I think, so my step into politics was that I went to the then leader of the council, which was Conservative. I don't know necessarily if that persuaded me either way. I would say my values are Conservative aligned, and I think you get to know more of that as you understand politics. So I don't think that necessarily overly influenced my beginning, really. I don't come from a political family necessarily. So that was my first route. It could be talking to your local councillor or ambassador, that type of avenue. But my questions were around some of the challenges I was having. So I spoke to the then MP regarding my son's experience in local education. I then spoke to the local leader of the council. And I suppose then it made me realise that actually this is something I might want to do. That didn't happen for another 4 years. And that was because of time, commitment, and a real understanding of where I was and what I could do. And I think you have to do that. That's ethically what you should do. My circumstances changed, and I was then able to change my commitment and time. And in 2014, stood in my first local election. It is a learning curve. I think everything is, isn't it? When you join a company, a new organisation, you think you know, but you have no idea
You
at
don't
all.
know. You do not know. So I'm interested because I think that it's quite a big leap, isn't it? I think it's a leap in terms of that kind of putting yourself out there because of the visibility that it gives you. In a small town especially, I think that's quite brave. But I think in terms of the time commitment, I think you just have to kind of be really driven by it, because I don't imagine you're making millions of pounds from this. Like, and obviously we filmed Gosport Grit together, and you know, Kirsten talks about being the mayor, and like it's not it's not for money, it's for love.
Yeah.
And is that the driving force, is just love and wanting to just make a legacy and an impact for you?
Yeah, later on in my career, so I was really fortunate to obviously work for a charity, and then I worked for Southampton Football Club. I learned a lot about myself there and a lot about psychology and people. And I think what I learned there was what my why was, and what motivates me. And we know in leadership, some people are driven by power and promotion, or money and salary. And that's what, when I talk about why, that's, I think, what I'm trying to capture. And I learned very quickly that actually my why was making a difference. And, I look back, and that's what my career in education was about. You can be born in any postcode, but actually if you have a mentor, or you have knowledge given to you, or even experience. So I'm not just talking about English and maths here. Skills in education is quite far reaching. That changes your prospectus. How you can go in life, what you can achieve, your aspirations. And that is really pivotal, I think, to everything I do. And I think, working in local politics, most of us are there because our why is either driven through some form of public service, not from financial gain.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, what could you share from your moment of how did you figure out that why? Because I'm guessing that will probably resonate with a lot of people. Like, how do you unearth that why? Yeah. Like, what did you do specifically? Or was it role modelling, or did you do any specific activities?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, it's understanding what stresses you. So what makes you panic and stresses you, and I think you have to understand what is your comfort zone, because it doesn't mean that you can't I suppose push through that, so it still can be part of your why. But I think if you're doing something that you get up in the morning and you are feeling sick or worried, then that really necessarily isn't your why, or part of it isn't your why. So I think you need to understand that. You then need to understand your support network, your toolkit. I think that's part of it. And then once you get to that point, you then can, I suppose it is a bit about experimenting, because you've understand what stresses you, you've understand your toolkit and your network and your support. And then you can go, okay, I'm going to try and test and, put connections out there and do that feel. And then you go, okay, I don't think about this. I can do it unconsciously, and I go in and I can talk freely, or I'm really interested and I'm engaged. That doesn't happen all the time because circumstances distract us. But when you find that, you then go down to the detail. And it's a bit like an organisation. I then went to writing almost like a vision and mission statement. Not quite, but
for your life, is that right?
Yeah, and my values.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I think from a politician, that does make you clearly understand, one, your political alignment, but two, where your lines are, and what you ethically, make choices to do. And leadership, especially in politics, with leadership, sometimes you're making decisions that do disappoint people. But you make them then from that why, that core place, from your values, and with the knowledge that you have then.
Yeah, absolutely. That really speaks to me actually about TEDx Gosport, because it's something that's all not-for-profit, like volunteer-led, and there's an incredible amount of disappointment because 115 people apply. We audition 37 and we get down to 12 people. So, but you kind of have to stick clear with what the overall goal is about raising aspiration, or about putting our ideas on the map and stuff like that. So you've got your why in place, you kind of know where you're politically aligned and you know your direction. So what's your vision, would you say, for Gosport? Like, what in the next 5 years would you love to have happen?
Yeah, so I think there's one, as a leader, you need that vision. And then also that does sort of tie into maybe why we do stuff, which is what legacy do you want to leave behind, which is maybe slightly ego-based, but I think there's an element of that. So my vision at the moment, and I am just trying to pull that together, because I think there was an element of Gosport that you sort of had to look underneath the bonnet and understand. And I'm very much driven by knowledge. You know, you make decisions, and the right decisions by the majority of people by understanding or understanding their position or the impact that you'll make on them. But my vision for Gosport is that there is truly an opportunity here. We should be fully open for business, and there is an opportunity for inward investment and for regeneration. And I think part of that is not looking at neighbourhoods or projects in isolation. I think, you know, Gosport necessarily hasn't had what I would call a master plan. And that's a master plan looking at how we create jobs. We create great spaces to live and work, great spaces to enjoy, whether or not that's open spaces or music and entertainment. And part of that is understanding some of our unique selling points, or what brings people here, or communities to stay here instead of going out of town to, you know, a local restaurant. And part of that is that, you know, I see our unique selling point as being our heritage, our creative and culture,
100%.
And our entertainment, which I think some people think may be bizarre because of the conversation we might have had about the Criterion and the Bingo Theatre, but that's a financial business decision. That's not necessarily aligned with what I feel should and shouldn't be available.
Well, we have amazing festivals and amazing, like even at like GMAG or like jazz at outside Stanley Park, like Pebbles Beach. It's like we're very musical, and like even the talent coming through Key West Studios. You know, we don't necessarily have to have a big central venue, because we have almost like, I think Gosport benefits from having those small bespoke moments. It's like a village. It's like the small moments and interactions, and it's almost like you find something like discovery, like you find a small little thing and it becomes your thing, like the candlelight sessions at Key West or something like that.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm excited for the People's Park because that's going to have a bandstand.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that to be like a pop-up musical.
Yeah.
I think that'd be super cool as soon as you come over the water. Like,
it is, yeah. So waterfront regeneration, that bandstand and that phase 1 is nearly done, which is exciting. What people maybe don't know about me is I do come from a background of dance and creative music. Okay. So I took I took art as GCSE. I represented Great Britain in the cheerleading championships.
Did you? How
I
cool.
did. I did ballet, tap and modern since the age of 3, finishing that to most probably the age of, might have been 12, 13, because then I took up swimming. I can't sing. That's most probably the only creative bit I can't do. Or tell jokes, maybe. I'm not...
Not a natural stand-up comedian. Probably just as well as a politician. Just crack a joke.
Yeah, not extremely... Yeah, need it scripted.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned cheerleading, and actually I think this town is amazing for so many little small things. Well, not small, big. Like our cheerleading squad who win like the national championships in America. They've won twice now in a row. The BMX situation is wild. Like our BMX scene. Even our ice skaters are amazing. And our steampunk, Gosport Steampunk, is like one of the biggest steampunk collectives in the UK.
I did.
It's crazy.
When I was mayor, I think it might have been deputy mayor, I did the tea jewel challenge from the steampunk, where you dip a biscuit in a tea, you have to hold it there for so many seconds, and then you have to hold it up, and then you stare your other partner, and it's the one that can hold it the longest before it breaking or without giving in. It's called a tea jewel. And just mentioning that, so we also have, so I mentioned swimming, and I just learnt this week that Gosport Dolphins, which I was part of 40 years ago, is celebrating their 50th year. And again, we've got huge champions that are part of that have gone through that. And then, you know, our other unique selling point, and we can't, and I do think this is coming back to Gosport, is our defence. You know, we've had maritime most probably here for a little bit, and we've got some huge employers that are investing in their skills here in Gosport. But I think we can now encapsulate that as defence and not just maritime. And that's really exciting, because that brings with it investment, skills and employment, and that's part of regeneration.
Well, it's really interesting because my partner's born and raised in Gosport, and he talks all the time about, we had these big kind of manufacturing industries, and we also had Hasler, and we had the Navy.
Yeah.
And he said, you used to go down the high street and it was absolutely rammed. If you went to a nightclub, there was like a queue down the street.
Yeah.
Which is never what I've experienced from Gosport, which is really interesting. But I think, God, how vibrant.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame those industries and things happened, and Hasler closed and bits and bobs happened, because it did ultimately change the shape of our town.
Yeah.
But I think it also created this grit and this thriving, like, we will build back and build stronger. And I think that's really amazing.
Yeah, and I think we're on the cusp of that. So that's
Yeah.
coming back. And I think you're right. When we talk about a thriving town, that, you know, you do need people to do that. So you do need residential, we need housing, we need people to be here. And then you need the jobs for those people, so they're not commuting out, and they are here. And that's a range of homes, from you know, social housing, affordable housing, all the way to elderly homes and individuals that they can use within and live within their communities.
Because people say, you know, we're a retirement town, but we're not.
No.
Like, there's so much going on. There's so many people of variable ages, so many creatives. I just love it. And I even, like, kind of, a lot of the heritage buildings are being used for pop-ups and creative workshops and studios, and I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm super pro Gosport. Like, it's weird because I've lived in a lot of places, but I sort of choose this place.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you discover, like, your true north, and you're like, this is where I should be, and like how I should make an impact.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And I think, you know, we've had friends that live outside of town, and then you bring them here and they're like, oh, you know, it's not as hard to get into as I thought. Or, oh my God, look at those buildings that have been converted and now used, and, you know, how that community fits together, and the fact that we're waterfront, I think is amazing.
Yeah. I even went to this big fancy thing yesterday in House of Lords, and I bumped into these two architects. I'd never met them before. And the lady said, oh, Gosport, I did my first ever architecture design for the Sea Cadets building in Gosport, like 20 years ago. I was like, that's so crazy, of like the entire world. Like, and then that was the beginning of her career. And she said, your town is amazing for how many heritage sites and how much opportunity there is to regenerate. And
Yeah, I think
amazing.
there's a bit of work we need to do, like I said, not have isolated projects or isolated neighbourhoods. So I think my vision will be about how we connect all of that. And that can be about transport, connection, you know, the movement of people and how we do that, all the way through the purpose of our high street, the waterfront, Leon the Solent, Stoke Road, Daedalus, Blockhouse. I mean, they're all going to be part of that jigsaw. Maybe my job now is to try and pull that together.
Yeah, I think connecting things together is just the way forward to create that cohesive and everyone going in the same direction. It kind of reminds me of placemaking, and I had Megan Carter on the show, actually.
I
love Megan. She's such a powerhouse.
She's energy, isn't
I
she?
know, she's amazing. I was just like, la, 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 la. I was obsessed. But she's a big placemaker.
Yeah.
And obviously I've worked with Business South as well for probably 9 years now, and they are all about placemaking and working with private and public sector to champion area. What do you think we can do in Gosport for more placemaking as residents or businesses? Like, how can we champion our town more? What should we do?
Yeah, so I think from a resident perspective, we have ambassadors and the ambassador programme. I think that's one part of it. And charities, residents and small businesses and creatives tend to be involved in that. So that's through the council. I think in business, it's joining that conversation that we've started today. You know, I've met with several large employers and a couple of small employers this week, and I'm starting to have that dialogue. And I think we need to bring people in the room so we hear their story, and I understand how they fit into that picture. So I think there's going to be an element of that. But small employers, you know. We need to understand where their fit is, what their purpose is, and whether or not, you know, from a creative of what Stoke Road is to Leon Solent, they are all different thriving hubs. But placemaking for me is how we tell that story and how then we understand that story and how we can tell that externally. And Gosport has much to say. And I've said it about a lot of things that, you know, I'm, you know, not going to be quiet about inward investment. You know, Gosport should be open for business. That's what we need. I'm not going to be quiet on local government reorganisation, because that is about placemaking and how we place ourselves within that. This for me is not necessarily if I agree or disagree. My part of my role as leader, it goes back to our early discussion earlier on, that you have to make decisions, but I really do feel passionate about making those decisions from a really informed place. So placemaking for me is you have to have conversation, and we want as many people from backgrounds, employment, residential, lived here all their life, from individuals like yourself that have come and chose Gosport, because that will set our place for the future. And that's really important. And retaining some of that grit that we're on that cusp about, of employers being excited about some of the historical buildings and heritage buildings that we have and bringing them back to life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I work a lot with Daedalus Waterfront, and I just love that so much of it is about renovation and development, but actually part of what I do in supporting them is capture heritage stories. And all of these brilliant stories, and like this woman who went in the 50s and got a £1 note, and these guys who came back who served there for years and years, and sharing their stories, and just lovely to kind of capture all that history and those moments. But people need to share more. I think even as a small business myself, like I do a lot of community projects, but there is that lack of togetherness. Like I'll do something and other people are doing something, but we're all sort of doing it. We just need to bring it together, and I don't quite know how.
And I think there's part of it is that people need to feel they can tell their story. I think there's a part of us as humans that we shy away from that. One, because we don't want to share, or we don't think people want to listen or hear our story. They're all valid pieces, part of our puzzle, and I think that's really important that we start to do that. I think the other thing, the one thing I've learned is either gathering stories or maybe telling my own story as being part of Gosport, is being a community champion. And, so I do a lot of volunteering and voluntary work. And so this week I've been a chair of a multi-academy, St Vincent, houses one of the educational institutes. I've been with them 9 years, been a chair for 5 years, and I've just stepped away from them. Now that's been great because it's allowed me to really understand some of the challenges in Gosport from an education perspective, a skills perspective, and how that looks from that youth, and understanding some of the staff and the setup locally, but also feel like I can contribute. But it's painful stepping away. It really is painful stepping away, and it's been a really weird week.
Is that because of your leadership now that you have to step away?
So I was always stepping. I think there's a point in leadership that you have to understand sometimes that your time is up and you should pass the baton. And I think part of that self-awareness, and 9 years for me and 5 years in a chair role does sort of lend itself to that. But I suppose, part of the reason why I most probably couldn't take a lesser voluntary role within that trust is because of being the leader of Gosport Borough Council. But that doesn't mean I still can't contribute. But that community champion part is part of that. So I also volunteer and a trustee for the Sea Cadets as well. And I think it's, part of our role as maybe community leaders, so not just politicians, is making sure that we go out there and try and get the story, because people aren't necessarily coming forward to tell them.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a community... well, it's funny because Megan called me Gosport Girl. It's actually funny, and all I do whenever I'm out is I go on about Gosport all the time. Like,
there's a song, Gosport Girl.
Is there?
Yeah, I'll send you. It's an old naval song.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Well, I'm trying to do a modern version of that, championing the town. So, okay, think the most important question of today's session... I've recently got myself a camper van and converted it. You have a camper van.
I do.
Tell me about your favourite place locally to go.
Yeah, I think the one thing with the camper van is really handy if you do like going into the water, paddle boarding, because you can rock up, get changed, make a coffee afterwards, especially if it's in the colder months. And I am such a water person, So for me, anywhere such as Gill Kicker or Stokes Bay, I think if you're just going to sit there and pop up the roof or look over, we've got some fantastic views of the Isle of Wight, but I would say most probably Leon Solent or Hill Head if I was to stretch it slightly, because you can sit up the top, stretch out your feet with the pop-up, have a coffee, or if it's later, a glass of wine, and just admire those views. I think it's stunning.
I'm actually going to do that this afternoon. I'm going to go to Titchfield Haven. Actually, it's my favourite place. I love, love, love. But I did have, Chris under the van with some fish and chips.
Yes.
And a cup of tea the other day, looking out from just Gaffers. So, yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me.
That's okay. Thank you for inviting.
And, I hope you've inspired some people around Gosport and the vision and where we're going and how they can also be a champion.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Annelies.